I want to just do a little bit of history, but it's important, a little bit of history, because it's relevant globally, not just to the UK. I think people know that fire brigades were formed originally to protect businesses and thus the economy, and that applies everywhere across the world, of course. And so it truly is interesting to study how developing countries recognise they need a fire service and fire protection to stop their economic growth being hampered. As they become more developed, the public demand to be protected from fire. Places like the Indian subcontinent are a prime example. How often do we hear of large life-loss fires in India, Pakistan and Bangladesh? We're in a quite different place in the developed world. Here in the UK, we learnt our lessons during the last century, but only following fire tragedies in factories, offices, shops, cinemas, theatres, nightclubs and sporting events. Thankfully, changes to legislation after these awful fires have resulted in very few fire deaths in commercial industrial premises. Woolworths in Manchester, a departmental store, in 1979 being the last, and even that helped improve fire safety through fire retardant foam-filled furniture after a lot of campaigning. And these have saved thousands of lives since their introduction in 1988. I'm afraid developing countries will have to go through the pain of more large loss fires before their governments wake up and are forced to improve their fire safety standards to an acceptable level. And herein, I think, is a huge role for the institution. The branches that exist across the world, and particularly, as I mentioned, in the Indian subcontinent, we do have branches there, and support from other branches to help raise standards in those countries is particularly important. And I know the institution's keen to move into those sorts of areas, and I think far more could be done than perhaps is currently being done, with a few notable exceptions. So, encouraging the creation of new businesses and protecting existing ones are crucial in any economy. These new businesses will help to create the necessary wealth and growth and much needed jobs. My view is that we need to ensure that both new and existing businesses are strong and resilient, including safeguarding and protecting them from the devastating effects of fire. Not only does fire result in loss of life, as we all know, it disrupts family life and creates business loss both in terms of its employees, its contribution to the local economy, and ability to recover and trade again in the aftermath of an incident. So why is it then that we really don't do a huge amount around economic loss? The insurers do, sure they do, but the interaction between the fire service and the insurers I really don't think is very good, and I think perhaps fire and rescue services can rise to the challenge here. I'm going to give you a little story. When I first became a chief a long time ago, and I didn't even have hair then, when I was in Bedfordshire, it's the Luton part of it, a fire in British Home Stores, a departmental store, where an arson attack had occurred on the first floor. They'd broken through some protection, some security protection, couldn't get in, but started a fire. A very serious fire, set off 5 sprinkler heads, heavily smoked, logged, low ceiling, quite a lot of damage. Fire service did a great job in stopping it spreading any further, and of course so did the sprinklers, but there was a lot of water damage. And the story was running, started to run around all this water damage. And I said, oh, hang on a second here, this is a good news story. This really is a good news story. Okay, bad news that the arson attack occurred, but good news in that the loss could have been much greater. How much was that loss? So trying to find that out was really difficult, but we got a number, £12 million, and the loss we worked out was £1 million. We got that figure from the insurers. So in actual fact, it was a very, very significant save of £11 million. So why are we not sort of using those sorts of stories far more? A, to promote the work of the fire and rescue service and the fire protection industry, because the sprinklers worked in it. I also think that a new incident recording system in the UK is being reviewed at the moment. There's an opportunity there perhaps, but I know 1 or 2 people in the room might shake their heads at this, but I really do think that we must stop using the average figure for a domestic fire. We do that because it's the only figure that we've really got. Because you try working out how much damage is done to a property, it's really quite problematic. And it actually makes it difficult for fire and rescue services because we're fitting smoke alarms, services are fitting smoke alarms, and are getting more calls to those properties. So, but actually the outcome is terrific. It's an out on arrival fire invariably. So, okay, yes, it's a call to the fire service, but it's a good outcome. But wouldn't it be good to measure the economic impact, the financial loss from those fires? I really do think there's a good opportunity to do that. So I'm a little bit dehydrated because I had a long flight last night, so just bear with me and wake me up if I fall asleep, will you? But you know, the issue about economic loss is one that I really do think we need to we do need to focus on, and you know, I think it will help play well with politicians, the world in which I work in, and you know, lots of people in this room interact with politicians as well, and money does make the world go round, and it does engage politicians as well. I know fire protection engineers are keen to be proactive to assist industry and commerce make the case for effective and proportionate fire design and protection measures, passive and active interventions in all areas. And just want to make a comment here. I was just talking to colleagues from Cooper's in the exhibition hall just now, and you mentioned passive to a firefighter, and passive fire protection really doesn't mean anything. And I just think it'd be really good for the passive fire protection industry to start talking about compartmentation, because actually passive fire protection is a firefighter's best friend. Because when you turn up at an incident, what are you looking for? You're looking for that passive fire protection, that compartmentation to see where you're stopping that fire. And I do think that would help bring about closer engagement between the fire service and the fire industry. I do worry, though, in terms of some of the fire protection measures that are being applied, that we have moved, in some cases, perhaps with the less professional fire protection engineers, and of course they wouldn't be members of the institution if they fell into that category, but getting into the sort of lowest common denominator fire protection measures. And what makes that, I think, more worrying is the fact that that relies very heavily on effective fire safety management. And anybody who's studied fire disasters anywhere in the world, what's the common thread that runs through virtually all of them? It's poor fire safety management. And there we are, relying very, very heavily on effective fire safety management around a complex fire engineered solution. A worry, a real worry. In the UK, I work very closely with fire and rescue colleagues, not only from the fire and rescue service, but also the fire and rescue supply industry and the fire protection industry. They're both represented here at this conference and exhibition. I'm delighted to see that. And it's important to do that to capture the range of truly innovative and thought-provoking work already underway, and to better identify opportunities for the future, of which I believe that there are many. Slight aside, but an important one, it links back to the institution AGM and conference. Those of you who were there last time, we were in London, I think it was 2010 if my memory serves me correctly, and you will remember Sir Ken Knight coming along talking about the wool project, and I think a lot of us thought he was starting to lose it at that point. He clearly wasn't, because that work has actually developed, and only a couple of weeks ago at Clarence House, the home of the Prince of Wales, the Prince of Wales was there. They actually ran some fire tests on wool carpets, wood bedding, and it actually worked very well indeed and performed well. And of course, it's a sustainable product. So interesting, but slight aside, but an interesting one. So perhaps start specifying a bit more wool around you fire protection engineers. One thing that really does worry me is the level of education and knowledge amongst operational firefighters. Most of you know I still have a keen interest in sprinklers. Some people think I might have turned over to the other side since I moved to work in government, but I still do have a keen interest in sprinklers. So I want to pose a rhetorical question, but I want for you to think about, and some of you will go, I know the answer to that, but we can have a good debate around it, and that's not what I'm actually wanting to do. I'm just trying to stimulate a bit of thought. So let me pose to you, if a building is sprinklered, should it have a fixed fire ventilation system? If so, should it be manually operated or automatic? Many argue that vents should only operate after the fire has been brought under control. Many say you shouldn't need vents at all when you've got sprinklers. But do we really know enough about the science and life safety property protection benefits to argue from a position of strength? Talking about the fire service here, I'm talking about operational firefighters here, not people who are working in that arena and interacting with engineers. Hampshire, if I might say, learned the hard way with a fire that's well known, the digital fire. I think it cost them circa £25 million when the sprinklers were turned off because there was an issue with ventilation. Do we now know when to use positive pressure ventilation fans externally, internally? Some do, some don't. Why should that be so? There is excellent practice already out there. We really do need to learn more effectively for mutual benefit. Factory Mutual, FM as they're now called, produced teaching packages after the digital fire, but I do worry that our firefighters and officers are not given enough education and training to be able to deal with sprinklered fires and indeed those in large complex buildings. I'm being deliberately provocative because all you'll be saying, yes we do, yes we do, but I can tell you there's an awful lot of people who do not get sufficient education and training in that arena. And how valuable is it? Great example, again, from an IFE event of about 12 years ago. You remember the Channel Tunnel fire, the first Channel Tunnel fire? Bill Welsh, who was the Senior Division Officer, area manager in modern terms, was in charge of that fire. The fire was burning in one of the running tunnels, as you know, and he was in charge of the crew that had to tackle the fire and had to open the door, knowing they had a raging inferno the other side of the door. Martin's ship's smiling because he did the investigation into it, and I know he'll probably, if I get any of this wrong, but Bill Welsh told the story brilliantly, how he was confident because he'd worked very closely with the fire protection engineers that the positive pressure was going to hold the fire back and they were going to be able to tackle the fire, and it worked. Whew. But you know, you really do need to be close to it all and really understand it, and to have the confidence that the fire protection engineers got the sums right. You know, and it is going to work that way. But thankfully, it did work, and the rest is history. I know the Chief Fire Officers Association are proactively engaging in the UK with other agencies and businesses to prevent fires from occurring in the first place. However, more needs to be done to protect the occupants and crews. Property protection and business resilience are matters for the business and insurance sectors. However, the fire sector can offer significant contribution to building and life protection, and I encourage more collaboration into good building design for the very reasons we've just been talking about. I'm sure I don't need to recount the tragic events of recent times where firefighters and members of the public have lost their lives. I'm sure that you share with me a common desire to ensure events such as this do not happen again. I believe that the talent, ambition and technology exist for us to make significant progress in this area, and I look forward to working with you at this pivotal time. Fire investigations must develop into detailed analysis of fires. We do it after disasters. Why not invest more time? It will pay dividends both locally and nationally, and it's a sort of a virtuous circle. I'm looking to Kira, who's talking tomorrow, my namesake from BRE, and we were on a platform a couple of weeks ago, and it looked like we'd shared notes beforehand, and we hadn't. I'm giving you a good plug again, Kira, but and we talked about, you know, what I call a virtuous circle around building being designed, it being built, it being occupied, it changing occupier, having a fire, then having that fire investigated, and then the lessons from that fire feeding back in. You know, how did the structure behave? How did the contents behave? How did the people behave? How do we capture that, and how do we share it? Why do we leave it until we've had a disaster to capture and share that? In health and safety, we're really good at capturing near misses. Why are we not good at doing that from fires and sharing it and using it? There's a role for the IFE here, guys, isn't there? There really is. That's why I joined the IFE 40 years ago, to listen to those sorts of things and get the feedback. And with modern methods of construction, it becomes even more important, doesn't it? we all know about the story with sandwich panels. We thought we'd resolved the problem to a large extent because of increased awareness and the insurers ensuring that sprinklers were put in most cases. But then what happens, we lost 2 firefighters in Sun Valley when we woke up, and then we lose 4 firefighters at Atherstone, sandwich panel related, fire bottled up as a result. Now, it's getting those lessons out and firefighters being aware of what could be happening in a building, what is that building constructed of, and really understanding what's going to happen. You're always going to be blindsided, always unusual things are going to happen, and that's why it's important that when that does happen, that it's captured. And if I can sort of reassure you, the review of the incident recording system in the UK, which is taking place, is going to have, because I'm going to make damn sure it has, a question on it around how did the structure behave, how did the contents behave, and offering a flag. It might be that the person who's filling that form in hasn't seen that before, so somebody in the service can come along and have a look at it and say, oh no, you've not seen that, that's a training need for you and your team, but then it's, if it's something beyond that, then it's a call to BRE to come in and have a look and see how what's gone wrong there and how we can feed that in and share that information. So, we really have moved to a new reality of tackling the root causes of fire and associated behaviours, as well as significant investment in prevention and protection methods. The fire sector and industry need to be collaborating at all levels to drive this change. I'm really very proud of what fire and rescue services have been doing to transform their services, but I look forward to seeing that transformation extend into greater work with all areas of industry. Transformation doesn't just happen. It requires work and commitment and vision to establish, but the benefits for services, industry and the taxpayer are huge. Now, Steve McGurk's just walked in at absolutely the right time, because Greater Manchester, Northamptonshire in the UK are using something called coal cutting. Some of you will know about it from Sweden. It's been around for some time. It's taken a while for us to catch up and use it, but there's absolutely no question at all. When you see it being used in training events, you really do see a massive improvement to the situation that a firefighter is going to find when they go in once they've used it. The temperature's plummeted. I mean, it really has. And, we really do need to get that shared out more quickly, and people, looking at those benefits. And clearly costs an issue. Of course costs an issue, but Steve tells me, and there's only Steve McGurk could do this, that the cost is coming down, isn't it, Steve? So hopefully more people will be getting into it. But offensive positive pressure ventilation. This really annoys me, because a massive amount of work has been done with friends of ours. The University of Central Lancashire fire engineering degrees were established there from 1991. Lots and lots of good academic work being done in the use of positive pressure ventilation fans. Why then is there only a handful of services using positive pressure ventilation fans now? Why is that the case? You're pushing the hot gases out, you're reducing the temperature. You can even go in without BA once you've got it in, when you've got a good exhaust. Not advocating that, but you could. We really do need to move forward. And is it transformation? I don't think it is really, but for some it probably will be described that way. Why is it that firefighting robots are not being used, given that the Japanese demonstrated them to a group of members of the IFE board in the 1990s who went over to a conference called Fire Safety Frontier, saw robots doing firefighting? There's a handful again. In fact, I think there's only a couple of services are using robots. When, if you've got an environment that is far too dangerous to send a firefighter in, why would you not want to have something like a robot available to you? The technology already exists, as I'm amply demonstrating, to make quantum leaps forward in improving firefighting, protection and building design, and thus continue to improve outcomes. Less people dying, being injured, as well as saving buildings, contents, and thus protecting the economy and jobs. I worry that our research and development is nowhere near as effective and efficient as it needs to be to help move the fire and rescue service forward. It is left in the hands of too few, albeit incredibly enthusiastic people who are not necessarily strategic thinkers. Why don't services collaborate nationally? Perhaps by creating, dare I say it, a centre of excellence from which all services would benefit both in lower costs, but most importantly from safer and better firefighting. This could and should apply to fire protection standards from a fire rescue service perspective. I feel sure the fire protection industry would welcome it, as indeed might Capita. That's probably a UK joke. Capita are the company that run the Fire Service College, for those people who don't know that. Big business would not survive if it didn't invest heavily in seeking out the very latest and best technologies to keep them at the forefront of their sector. By nationally coordinating work standards, money could be saved, as well as improving standards for the future and for the safety of both the public and firefighters. There should be no doubt that the future holds much opportunity for better design and fire engineering in buildings. With innovation in building design, passive and active applications and general fire safety. I've had the privilege of witnessing firsthand the very best that our organisations have to offer, and I have no doubt that through innovation and change our services will meet and exceed the challenges we face.